All right, everybody. Welcome to another round. Tonight we have the amazing and world famous and legendary Thomas Perkins. Tom, hey everybody. So, good evening. It's me, Thomas Perkins, Stephen B. Jones, and Sassy Scott Collins.
Look
Scott,
at
I
that
guess.
Captain Cold. That's the stuff.
Yeah, that's nice.
I feel like the show would be remiss if we don't start with some sort of
Yeah, the theme music. I cut it. I cut it today because I couldn't get the sound to work. So Tom, welcome. Thank you very much for coming on the show. I have been a fan of yours since I guess we were almost practically kids way back at the Sony building, Apple building, right? Early.
Yeah, we worked on Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man together.
Right, the early 2000s, and you've
Back
gone
when
on.
Fire was new.
Tom, were you in house on Spectacular Spider-Man?
I was.
Okay, Jeff and I were trying to figure out, was that the first show you and Jeff worked on together?
Yeah, it was, and that was. I'd never worked at the Apple building before, so I will say that was a really unique experience because they really pared down. So just trying to get things like supplies was crazy, and then the fact that there was like only one window in the entire building, and it was like this Turkish prison window in the ceiling in this uninhabited part of the building. You'd have to kind of go visit to look up and see the sun. I thought was amazing.
So
wow,
so animation is often the redheaded stepchild of production, and we do not necessarily get the best places. The Apple building at Sony, where Boondocks and Spider-Man were made, and a bunch of other things, was also a warehouse for old props.
It was they converted a prop warehouse, right, to and then just said, well, we could put humans in here, right?
And so we were on stilts in this gigantic warehouse full of just old, like there was a giant Jupiter hanging from the ceiling. There was a defunct helicopter outside in the yard. And I remember you had to walk down this long, rickety hallway to get to the actual office. And Sean Galloway Cheeks, there was an earthquake. I don't remember if you remember, Tom, but there was an earthquake, and Sean had never been in a California earthquake before. And so he came out and goes, what do we do? Do we go to the exit? Do we do the thing? I'm like, I'm sorry, my friend. If we're going, you'll never make it. If we're going down, it's too late. You'll never make it down that hallway.
Allow me to say, I from experience, I know that's to be true. I remember back in '94, before I got into animation, I went to bed on the second floor of an apartment building, and I woke up on the first. I was excited in all the wrong ways.
Yeah, yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah. So yeah, I can only imagine what Sean would have thought of that.
Yeah, he was not happy.
Well, it just shows he was paying attention. It's like if you're excited about that stuff, you clearly had a death wish going on.
Yeah,
well,
for
so
sure.
Spectacular Spider-Man was the first time you guys had worked together, but Jeff's very first job in animation was Justice League Unlimited, and I'm wondering, did you guys, Tom, were you on the Batman at that time?
I was on the Batman, so probably
so you guys
we were probably neighbors, but I don't think we'd met. Right. Because at that point, probably the most interaction I had would be with the design team on Titans, for instance. I don't think I ever saw the Justice League people. They were like a whole other echelon of cool than us.
Oh, yeah.
Can we give a top 10 of what Tom's worked on?
Yes.
Absolutely. But I think we were on the third floor. Justice League was on the third floor, and Batman was down on the first floor with Titans. So I think the only echelon of coolness was simply stairs. I think that was the only thing separating us.
Yeah.
But dude, you understand, from a man coming from like say Sony and all the space action things and other stuff I'd worked on, the one constant comment, like if there was an internet to be had back in the day, it would have been, "That's pretty cool. It's not as cool as a Bruce Timm show, though." And we have to like that's fair. That's totally cool, man. I get it, man. I'm a big fan too, so whatever. So there was always that like, well, maybe one day I could work on a show like that.
Well, I think before we do Tom's top 10, so you guys met at Sony in the Apple building, and then you guys probably worked together when Jeff was on Justice League, and I was on Justice League too at that point. I think I moved up from Titans away from you, Tom, to get away from you.
It happens. You got to fight that attraction somehow.
But I think Tom's one of the first people I met in animation. I think because my first job in animation period was on Extreme Ghostbusters in the spring and summer of '97.
Right on.
Now, had you worked on Project Geeker and the other stuff before that, or was Extreme Ghostbusters
That
your
was
first
my
show
first
too?
gig too. During
All right.
the Geeker time, it turns out I knew a guy named Alan Caldwell. Yeah,
Nice.
and
We gotta have that
that's
one on the
that's
show.
some history right there.
Yep.
But I knew Alan Caldwell prior to animation because he was trying to get into comics. And when he got over to Sony, he was on Geeker. And I ended up, I had tried out, didn't get a job, but he said, well, why don't you come and have lunch? I'm like, cool, man. So I went to lunch there like once a week for 6 months. And finally the prop supervisor goes, hey, that long-haired hippie dude, is he working? And they're like, no, I don't think so. And then I got a job on this.
So, well, I definitely have that sense of like there was a bunch of super talented people that worked on that show that you and I have now known for 25 years, and we still work together throughout the industry. But there was also a lot of us where it just felt like, oh, can you hold a pencil? All right,
dude,
come work at Sony.
That was totally no, dude. When I had applied to Sony, I'd applied to a lot of other places, and they always go, so what have you done? College? They're like, yeah. Tell me when you've had a job. I'm like, cool, okay, cool. And then Sony was like, you're an upright primate with an opposable thumb. Do you think you can do this? I'm like, please let me do it. Right. You know, and don't get me wrong, I'm very grateful that they did because Lord knows, I wasn't a great shakes at the time, but I did have the benefit of meeting my first big mentor, Phil Barlow, who was the lead supervised art person for a lot of these Sony shows. And he was also instrumental in sort of broadening my artistic horizons with things like Mobius and whatnot like that. Right. So it was a real turning point for me.
When did you go? You went from Ghostbusters on to Men in Black, right?
I did freelance for Men in Black. They were sort of like, instead of going to Men in Black, they sent me to Big Guy, as you see here.
Right.
And I did that with Matt Thompson and a whole host of other talented folks. And that was a lot of fun. I was really bummed out that we didn't ever get to meet Jeff Darrow because I had the comic at home.
Mm-hmm.
But that was one of those shows. I'm sure animators died making that show.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, the designs are crazy.
Because the notes we get from the executives on high would be like, yeah, we want like the comic, more detail, more stuff. And now as a much older, wiser character designer, I'm like, oh, sweet Christ, what the hell? No, don't do that. No, but because something's cool you draw it once, but turning that thing, let alone make it move. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah, well, there's like all these designs. This is from Big, right?
Yeah, those are all from Big Guy.
Yeah.
Like that was one of the big villains. The other thing was from an episode where there were all these intergalactic champions that were being captured by this one guy. He was kind of like the Big Guy and Rusty equivalent of the champion from Marvel, who just goes around beating the snot out of people to see who's better.
Yeah.
Right.
Did you work on Godzilla too, Tom, or did you just go right? Okay.
I did. I think Godzilla was actually my second gig.
Right. Okay. So you worked on that whole first batch of Sony shows after Ghostbusters, and then was the Batman your intro to Warner Brothers?
No, my first entry into Warner Brothers was on a much heralded and now legendary direct-to-video known as Kangaroo Jack. Good Day USA.
Oh, excellent.
Well played.
I mean, after all the sequels have come afterwards, I'm surprised that I have to name it, but it's well known.
Right. It's pretty well known. And then you'd worked on Batman.
Yes. I worked on Batman with Jeff Matsuda, who I'd worked with at Sony on Jackie Chan Adventures for part of the first season.
Oh, yeah.
I love that Batman one.
Tom, were you still when I was on Jack? I think I was on Jackie season 2 and 3, maybe. Were you still on it at that point?
No, I think that was Lopez and Suzuki at that point.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Basically, what had happened was I was on the first season. I think I got through the first 6 episodes, and
Ovi too.
Huh?
Ovi also, I think, worked on.
Yep. But the thing was, is that Sony used to have us under contract because when we all got brought on, they were like, "Oh my God, we're gonna put you under contract," and when the contracts ran out, they decided that the pressure was off and there was enough ready bodies to throw at things. So they didn't need to keep us under contract anymore. And I just bought a house for the first time. And they said, hey, I said, well, how long is this job going to last? They said like 3 months. And I'm like, I have a mortgage. I need something longer than that. So an opportunity to art direct at a CD-ROM company for educational software came up. So I went and did that for about a year. The tech bubble burst, and then I went back in animation.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you were doing that, I was working at Stanley Media. Maybe that's during the tech bubble. That was my experience with the tech bubble, to work at what essentially was a money laundering company.
I don't think you were the only one.
Right.
No, yeah. Dusty Abel was there, and from the other Drink and Draw, the Reverend Dave Johnson is the one that actually got me the job at that place.
Very nice. Very nice.
All right. So, Tom, it would take us the actual rest of the time on the show to name every show that you've worked on. So,
right.
And me and Jeff could play the fun game of name. But what would you say, like off the top of your head? What are 10 of the favorite things that you've worked on or that you're happiest about?
Well, one of the things I love about, so if I could just jump in, one of the things I love watching Tom do was like when we were on the Avengers together, watching him do his versions, just cool characters. Like that show has so many great, just so many great monsters in it, just so many great versions of, and Tom does so many great versions of the Marvel characters, even for fun, right? Tom, didn't you just do?
Yeah, I like to play around with all those toys because
I love that.
You have all this like, I want to do that one day, and though I never had the wherewithal to actually make it the jump into comics, I always wanted to play with those characters. So but getting animation, doing Avengers was certainly one of my real top 10s because it was a real bucket listing for me because I grew up on all these characters.
Jeff, can we going back and forth between these two images that we just saw? Like, I think it's such a great. If I can rave about Tom for a minute,
sure.
Like, okay, so Tom's one of the first people I met in animation. He's also one of the nicest people I've ever met in animation, and I'm happy and proud to call him a friend. And over the course of 25 years, a lot of the people we worked with, sometimes you come closer, sometimes not. But Tom has just always been such a great, consistent, nice guy. And I got to say, just too personally, I went through a period where I had a little bit of a rough time a couple of years ago with work and personal stuff and different stuff. And Tom is one of the most consistent people that checked in on me, I gotta say. So, big love for the very, very big man.
You're a very kind fellow. You're also a lovely human being of whom I speak nothing but good things of in the world.
Well, but thank you, Tom. But looking at those
to that end, to both of you, William Dunn says hello.
Oh, excellent. Yay, Will.
Yeah.
I love Bill.
But what Tom's been able to do something truly remarkable, in my opinion, in the world of TV animation, which is that, like, if you look at those two, that like Spider montage, the Marvel montage, and then his little take on the X-Men montage is like one thing that Tom's been able to do remarkably well, which is something that every TV character designer has to be able to do, is draw in different styles, and Tom has worked for a lot of, he's worked in the Jeff Matsuda style. He's worked like on a whole bunch of different, very different looks, but he has the adaptability that every character designer needs to have to be able to survive in this industry, which is remarkable in and of itself. But he's also someone that also has a really strong personal style too. And I guess maybe that's the benefit of how much he draws for himself and posts online, is that he's kind of constantly reminding everyone, like, hey, I've kind of got my cool own charming way of drawing, and maybe you dopes should be smart enough to give me more shows to be the lead designer on, because look how cool this shit looks too.
Totally.
But I think when you think about to have that level of like, because a lot of people, to be as adaptable as Tom has had to be, sometimes you give up your own personal voice and your own personal look, and you just turn into like, well, I'm just the guy that changes styles every episode. It's almost like someone who speaks in so many different accents, they forget what their own accent is. And I think, Tom can do, he's drawn in practically every different style, but he still has a very strong one. And he's also carved out a niche, I think, of that. If you think think interesting creatures, you think Tom. You know, like he'd be the first person you call. Oh, perfect example. Holy cow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, Tom, I
Look at
was
that
hoping,
madness.
yeah, that we would take advantage of your skill and your kindness and have you teach me how to do a cool monster and walk me through it.
I'm super happy to help in any way I can.
Excellent.
I
All
mean, don't
right,
get me
so
wrong, I'm in awe of the monsters you do. So, you know, little trepidation there, but I'll do my best.
yeah, but look at that. Look at that. So, just a couple of these that were. I love that one.
Damn.
Look at
Actually,
that one.
that one I'm channeling my inner Mr. Collins.
Oh yeah, that one's awesome. But then then there's this one. I love this guy. that guy's the best. So
That guy needs to be in comics.
yeah.
Right.
And then this great sort of like Godzilla but more thing.
Well, I will say that, like, usually, I mean, the kind of monster, one designs usually predicated on the genre that you're playing with. My fallback is always, I'm a big fan of kaijus and things, because
Yeah.
when I was a kid, Godzilla and Gamera and Rodan and all those guys were my stuff. But also, as a kid in the 70s, cryptids were a huge thing, as you have here.
Mhm.
Because you always had Leonard Nimoy going out in search of one of them or something, or
Right.
whatever. You know, so depending on the kind of stuff you like to do, there's any number of different ways to approach it. I usually try and think of it. There's not one way to do it, but I think that looking at nature and animals and insects and things, there's always so many much weirder things than you'd ever suspect existed in real life.
Right.
Nice.
That's lovely.
So looking at all of this is where I wonder if Tom is actually a clone or if there's more than one Tom or a twin or something.
I mean, how much he does?
Well, looking at all of Tom's stuff, just panel after panel after frame, Tom is essentially if you take the best of me, Jeff, and Scott, and you just combine it into one artist.
Damn you, Tom.
I should be so fortunate. I wish I was.
He's the best.
It's like, oh, cartooniness? Yeah, you got me. You know, like millions of interesting creatures, you got Scott. Like really good three-dimensionality and volumetric drawing, you got Jeff. It's like basically Tom's just one-stop shopping.
He does it all. All right, so here's my blank piece of paper. I'm gonna fly without a net.
Sure.
When you think about like when you first approach a new monster or a new alien,
sure.
What's your first thought? Do you think of like shape or a feeling?
I usually start with is just like the seed idea. I mean, sometimes it's just a shape, like that one you pulled up from the YouTube thing with these shooting out the laser breath. That was with shapes and whatever.
Okay.
But exactly. But I will say though that for a lot of it, I try to kind of get at least a seed idea of what I want it to do and what's the vibe I want to put out. Because like, that guy won't work in the same universe as that banana guy, but I had a lot of fun with the banana guy too.
The banana guy is pretty great. This is another one. You also do robot. Just this is not just kaijus, but like look at that cool ass robot.
Well, I think that's what Tom manages to draw correctly, but it feels as if you're just like letting what's in your brain flow out of your brain. You know what I mean? Like it's like, oh, hey, how about an eyeball on that? You know, like.
Seems like it's trying to like open up the toy box in your head, right? So like if there was like for you, Jeff, like if when you were a kid, did you have a boogeyman that really bothered you? That they were like, don't look under the bed, that like fucking whatever's under there.
His name's the Reverend Dave Johnson.
Right. Yeah, so I'm going to start with the first thing that popped into my mind is almost like a gorilla shape.
Sure.
All right, so
yay!
So for like
love gorillas
stuff, like the benefit of those is like a lot of people draw gorillas like they're just big dudes. Mm-hmm. And the thing I like about gorillas, and you guys draw a lot of gorillas, is just like the disproportionality from out of the human norm. So like the bigger, heavier arms, the like that sway back kind of thing going on. There's so many things you could play with shape wise.
Right.
I did a gorilla monster not too long ago, where like somebody was talking about like how Godzilla was a gorilla whale or whatever, and so I actually tried to take a whale with gorilla attributes to make a Godzilla that's a bootleg, right? And you're like, oh well, if you did that, I'm sure I'm not the only one to ever done that, but I just I played with making a direct translation of the name and playing with it.
That's well. As I'm looking at that, Jeff, though, then when I think, well, for Tom Perkins action, sure, that's an incredible gorilla body you're doing, Jeff, but he should probably have a crocodile head, right?
Well, yeah, that was the next step. I'm like, okay, so not to have it just be a same old boring gorilla guy. I'm like, okay, so what? Clearly, he's going to have some sort of like, I don't know.
Like, you might ask yourself, like, okay, depending on what you want to do, like, I mean, sometimes it's integrating of other DNA from other creatures. Sometimes it's biomechanical stuff is fun. I mean, one of my influences would be the mighty Otomo, right? And like all that kind of cool, weird body horror stuff. There's so many things to play with. Because doing the kind of thing you're doing there, like I also would look at, like, in my head, I'd think about Kirby, I think about Otomo, I think about Terada.
Katsuya Terada.
That guy is a beast.
Incredibly great.
But I love the shapes you got going on right there. I think that's cool. Then the other thing I ask myself is, like, how would that benefit from extra limbs? How would that be like? How would it benefit from, like, say, symbiotic life forms attached to it, like a King Ghidorah, like serpent heads coming off of the shoulders or whatever like that?
Mark Solomon in our comments lets us know that he actually got a gorilla drawn by Mr. Walt Simonson and inked by Klaus Janson off of Dan's show.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty impressive.
If you go back to that image that we just had up from
his sketchbook.
Well, the amazing thing that Tom did here is that, oh God, that's so good. I don't know where Tom's sketchbook is in my move. It's in one of my boxes, but Tom did an illustration like this on every damn title page. There's a new riff on these characters. That one might be my favorite one.
Yeah, there's so many.
This was one of my favorites from the sketchbook.
Yeah, is it Copic markers, Tom, that you're using?
Yeah, like Copic markers and sometimes Sharpies, because like the Sharpies will cover the printer ink of the yellow dots, the ellipses. So so if someone says, "Hey, I'd like a commission a sketch in the front," I try to make it. I'll do a sketch. But the funny thing is, people don't realize that that's the sketch. They think that was printed in the book. I'm like, no, that's the drawing I did for you.
Right. Well, I mean, I
love the coloring on the floating device. I mean, that's a great one too.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites. I like it because it's just sort of like if you were like at the bus stop in some weird alien burg where you're like, oh, check that shit out. And that dude's just hanging out with his buddies.
Really makes me want to. I mean, you luckily draw the Legion and the Fatal Five a lot just for fun and looking
like that.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh my God.
Look at that one. I love that one.
I get a lot of shit for putting brains on Validus's shoulders, but I like it. I'm like, fuck it.
Ironically, he's really stupid, but he has 3 times the brains.
Sure.
All right, I'm going to need Tom's address when we get off the show.
I love that you made the very conscious choice that there's no breathing room for the brain in those bubbles.
No, it's all just right up against the glass.
That's right.
It's not like a human skull where there's a little bit of give between the skull and the brain. It's like, nope, the brains are about to, if that cracked, brain just bursts out of there.
Oh, dude, it's high pressure. At any minute, he's going to like cover the place.
I was about saying it's only there to generate electricity anyway. So
yeah. I will say I did a Validus versus Ultra Boy as if they were a kaiju and Ultraman.
Oh.
So I basically took Ultraman, and instead of the gem in the chest, I took the Ultra Boy logo and made it into like a set thing. And he has an Ultraman head and whatever like that. But and then Validus has this big tail with brain spikes on the tail and whatever.
That's great.
I want to work on that Fatal 5 show.
Yeah. There's so many good ones.
And I want to work on it too.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to keep drawing, but before I cut back to what I'm doing, I wanted to point out. So when Tom and I were working on, I guess you started doing them on the Avengers, the lunchbox stuff.
Yeah. I started doing the lunchbox stuff. Yeah.
So Tom would do these drawings for his kids. When he was a kid, he'd make lunches for his kids. And he'd do drawings on their lunch bags, and then he did it for how many years, Tom?
5 years straight. I did it until they outgrew them and they felt embarrassed to walk into school with that in their lunch bag. So that kind of.
It's like an 800-page epic that you drew every day.
There are recurring characters. There's villains that come back, and whatever. There's whole things. Every Halloween they go to Dimension H31, which is a Halloween dimension, and there's all kinds of things there.
Tom,
best dad ever.
Tom, I think you live in H31, and then you just,
or
at least your brain does, and then your body is just in our dimension.
So you'll do this fun kind of, the things that's amazing about your range, Tom, is like you'll do this kind of fun off the cuff thing, and then something like this.
Well, you got to mix it up.
Yeah, right.
And go work all day. He basically put in a full work day on the lunch bags.
Right.
And then went and worked for the man.
How much time would you spend on those lunch bags, Tom?
Maybe about 2 hours.
2 hours total.
Yeah.
Now, if the kids try to talk,
really epic, I might go over to 3. But
if Tom's children tried to speak to him during that time, he would scream at them. But he was doing it out of love.
Exactly. Well, no, I would do them. I would get up in the morning before they got up, or I do it after they went to bed. Because the thing was, the funny thing about being a parent, I discovered beforehand, I was, time is whatever it is, and you do what you do and whatever. But once you have kids, you got to roll up correct every day. You can't be like, well, I didn't have time to deal with you. So I learned how to actually I don't sleep. Sleep is for the weak.
Sure.
So it was an 11-year period. No, there was a 16-year period where I got about 4 hours of sleep a night.
I am not good at that.
God bless you.
No,
I am not good at that at all.
I think you're
because on top of all this, I also do freelance.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah.
So,
I want to be Tom when I grow up because I just don't know how he does it.
He does. It's impressive.
it's bloody-minded obsession.
Right. Hey, Tom, can you show that thing from behind you, that poster you did for Heroes?
Oh, sure. Let me pull that up. Let's see here. I don't know if that'll show.
Right. So a prop for that. So you do, apart from doing all the animation stuff, you will occasionally sneak in a gig for CSI or Heroes or other TV shows.
Wow.
Which is always fun to get to do that kind of work because it's a whole different kind of discipline. I think the last freelance gig I did for live action was for it was the reboot of Amazing Stories, and I did some comic book posters for some kid's bedroom or something.
Nice. But
it's fun to do that stuff because I went and I'd visit some of the sets and see these places you'd see on TV, and suddenly to be able on Heroes. They said, you all walk around the set? I'm like, sure, that'd be cool. And so in 1 minute, you're in a dank, hovel of a place. And then you turn a corner, you're in a police station. And then you turn another corner, you're in an Irish pub. And you're
nice.
Wow, this stuff's cool.
It's like your brain.
You got to keep it moving around. I really like what you got going on there, man.
All right. So I added, looking at
make your screen the big one, Jeff.
So what? Oh yeah. So looking at the Fatal Five, I decided I'm going to follow Tom's advice and add some machinery up here.
Nice. That makes me think of a monster I had done back in the day. I was doing a cross between dungeon crawl stuff and sci-fi space stuff, and so I had a guy hiding from this demon that had tubes coming out of his bag that were they had trapped souls in it, so that his power source were these ghosts in these tubes on his back.
Creepy.
That's what that means. That's really neat.
It's super creepy. All right, so
that's great.
The tubes on his back. Add a little bit of tech to the flesh.
Very
I think
nice.
that's interesting. And then maybe what about some electricity zapping?
No, I think there should be Jeff, I think those should be spheres of stuff, and there should be babies or other liquid, things floating in the liquid.
So
I think that's actually an excellent choice there, Mr. Jones. I think that's excellent.
Agreed.
It's really easy for me to say while I just doodle a pretty girl here on my
Hey,
iPad.
put the Empire State Building on his back. Maybe the Eiffel Tower. That'd be really cool.
And Brooklyn Bridge.
Remember, it's always easy for somebody to go to write these 3 words, and Atlanta burns. Now draw
Right.
them.
Yeah.
Kind
Yeah,
of like
we were talking-
I was watching your Flash episode earlier, and there was that one shot that Scott had done where it was like an X marks the spot for Grodd, and there's a down shot on the city, and I was like, oh my God, that's amazing, you know. So clearly you could do it.
Scott's insane.
Yeah, that was bananas. All right, speaking of Scott drawing, what you got? This is a hella.
That's awesome.
Hella cool, Scott.
Yay!
Clearly you are a Northern California guy.
Yeah. Good one, Jonesy. All right. So one of the other things that you have to do as a character designer, I mean, the monsters and all this stuff is fun, but then you just have to go through the mechanics of doing expressions.
Yep.
Mm.
Yep.
Right. Like it's not just the 3/4 front of a cool monster. You actually have to do the work and then hand that off to an animator. Like, this is how your eyes are going to look. This is how the shape of the face and the hair will work. Just
And
the math.
Reference for the story team too. You know.
Yeah, the job, you know, as I see it as a character guy, and it's been borne out over many years, is that I have to try and problem solve as much stuff as possible for, you know, storyboard guys. So they're not, I mean, they already have to figure out how everything's going to be shot and staged and move it. And the idea of like then also making them have to figure out all the design stuff is not fair. So I'm like, all right, I want to make sure that we have as much stuff ahead of the boards as possible so that they can more easily do their job, because their job's tough enough as it is, you know.
That's one of my favorites.
A team player.
Super Adaptoid.
I wish we could have had the Super Adaptoid on Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. I drew this to show Zero to go, dude, can we totally get the Super Adaptoid, please?
Right. And you also, I don't remember Rom being in the Avengers.
No, I did. Okay, those images that people float around the internet all day long, and they say, oh, it's from that canceled season of the Avengers, and they spew all sorts of like they're mad at the world because it never happened. But the thing was, those weren't official. I did those because at one point before our second season aired, Disney showed a shot from our Everybody Teams Up to Fight Galactus episode.
Right.
And they showed every guest star we had. And I thought, oh, man, that sucks. So I decided to make 13 screenshots for episodes we never had.
Nice.
Cool.
And I picked out characters from my childhood that I loved. So I collected ROM comics. I liked Omega the Unknown. I liked.
Is that why Adam Warlock's in that one that Jeff?
Yeah, well, Adam Warlock's in there because even though we had Adam Warlock in a Guardians of the Galaxy episode, it wasn't the version I wanted because I really love the Starlin / Gil Kane version.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Where he's like Space Shazam
in shorts.
In shorts. Why not, man?
Golden shiny speedos. I'm a power of Omega. I love when you do jam pieces too. That's another great Tom shtick, if you will. Is like, wait, what two fun characters that don't go together, or two characters that you never thought of that they should go together?
This one was based on a discussion that I was having. I don't know if it was online or at a studio or something, but somebody came to me and said, Olmec and Shazam are really the same dude. And I'm like, go tell me how. And he goes, well, there's Brother Eye, and then there's the Wizard Shazam. There's the this, there's the that. Buddy Blank and Billy Batson are basically the same kind of idea, whatever. And I go, you're not wrong. And so I drew that for kicks for him as a gift.
Yeah, that's a great one.
It's really good.
That's a really, really great one. And then you did these Green Lantern. I love, did you work on the Green Lantern show? I don't remember.
I worked on the CGI one, and I worked on the one-off movie First Flight.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. That was one of my favorite. That's another one of my top 10 favorites because that was a very different kind of show, the 3D one. And it was my one chance to get to work on a Bruce Timm thing, which I was so excited about. And then it's funny. I discovered after years and years and years of being on action shows that weren't cool because they weren't Bruce Timm shows, I discovered something I didn't know existed. Bruce Timm haters.
Oh,
and
what?
I finally get on a thing and people were like, and then the internet, of course, had people like, why are they giving him blah, blah, blah. And they were a very small minority, but you'd still have them. And I was like, dudes, I'm finally here. Shut up.
Right.
And it was one of my favorite gigs because it was a really collaborative environment. And unlike a lot of animation shows, instead of just being a character guy doing the line art and the turns and whatever, I got to do props. I got to do digital paint. I got to do effects. You know, I got to do a lot of different stuff, and they ran it slightly differently. So every artist, like, there's certainly background guys and whatever, but there was a lot more like, hey, let's do this together. And because it was a lot of kids right out of art school, they were already coming out knowing how to do a lot of stuff right off the bat that we never got to do. So it was like, all right, the bar is raised, let's go play. And it was an awesome experience.
Do you think some of that was also related to Giancarlo Volpe working on it too? Some of that?
It might have been. My experience working with both Bruce and Giancarlo was great. It was awesome. I had the best time.
Giancarlo just ran that show that me and Jeff and Scott are all really good friends with, Derek Robertson. And Giancarlo just ran that Boys Diabolical animated spin-off of the Boy show.
Cool.
Yeah, a bunch of folks we know worked on that show, but I just saw that I think because of the nature of the Boys image, it was very hush-hush until suddenly it just exploded into the world. Ooh.
Yeah, I definitely got to go give that a look.
That's so pretty.
Ooh. And then
that was for that there was one of those like trending, like everybody does their own Sailor Moon from that one shot angle or whatever. I was like, okay, I'll do mine just for kicks. And so I was sort of kit bashing Kit Kiter and Sailor Moon into one thing.
Nice.
Because I always liked that artist's comics, those manga, like whether it's like the Super Sentai stuff or Kit Kiter or whatever. And so that was fun.
Hyperdimensional Mecha Guardian 27.
Yeah, the mech stuff is great. I'm gonna let me show hang on a second. Where is this thing I wanted to show you guys? You're doing Star Trek, the evil universe in the regular universe.
Oh yeah.
Now, Tom, I don't believe that there needs to be a fight in this area, but are you more of a Trekker than a Star Wars guy? Because I feel like
I love all of it, but I'm more of a Trek guy.
I was going to say, because considering how prolific you are and how much you draw just whatever is in your brain, I honestly can't think of a time where I've seen you draw anything Star Wars related, but you draw Star Trek related stuff all the time. All
the time. Well, I will tell you, it's funny. When I was a kid, I remember seeing the first ads for
love that
for Star Wars. I was in like first grade, and I was super excited, but I had no idea what it was about. So, of course, no internet, no way to know these things. But so I did a comic book of it on like lined paper in first grade, like you do. And my Star Wars was laser sword wielding Vulcans versus space werewolves.
I would buy that.
I didn't know what Chewbacca was. There was those guys sword fighting with laser swords, and I like Spock. So fuck it, that's what we're doing. That's Star Wars.
Tom, did you have the Mego Star Trek figures?
Fuck yeah, I did.
Because I think you and I are around the same age, so I think like that's that funny thing of I think you and I were both into Star Trek before Star Wars came out, even though we were basically just in kindergarten.
Right.
And Star Trek was huge back then.
It's true.
My dad was a huge Star Trek guy, so I would watch it with my dad. It's one of those fun movies I have of my dad, and like it's to the point now. Like I see the first like 3 seconds of any opening thing of Star Trek, I'm like, oh yeah, it's that one.
Yeah, you automatically know it.
It just cracks me up to think about that because my grandmother actually sewed me a fake Captain Kirk shirt, for Christmas, like the 5th year, with it was very authentic, 3 gold stripes around the sleeve, and it went with my utility belt and the Mego figures. But I just laughed, thinking like Star Trek is not really a show for 5-year-olds, and yet that was like my favorite thing.
Dude, that was my jam. But here's the thing, though, you got to understand, though, if you look back at like media back then, though, we didn't really have the same kind of filters happening.
No.
You're like, well, what is there? Okay, well, we're gonna watch this because your parents are probably watching it or whatever,
and it's on.
And it's on. I mean, there's 3 channels in the world, so
right. You did not have a ton of choices.
Like I was trying to explain to my kids the magic of like, oh yeah, you missed that shit. It's never coming back.
Right.
Yeah,
or having to wake up at 3 a.m, setting your alarm clock to wake up at 3 a.m, so you could actually watch Creature from the Black Lagoon or something.
Oh, for sure,
Right.
man.
Or why
Yeah,
we
because you had to read the TV guide to know what was coming on.
Yeah.
or why we saw Star Wars 14 times in the theater, riding the bus for hours, or that you bought those horrible car, like what do you call them? The collectible cards, because that was the only way you could devour those images.
Oh, sure.
Like,
or you'd go find a copy of Starlog magazine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
If you could find one of those at the drugstore.
right. Tom, I remember when the first ads, I think I had seen Star Trek. I think I'd been allowed to see some of Planet of the Apes on on TV, and the only thing I remembered as a kid was just the last image, of course, Planet of the Apes, like with the Statue of Liberty. So then when I first saw those ads for Star Wars on TV and I saw the Sand People fighting Luke Skywalker, my 6 or 7-year-old brain went like, turn the Sand People into the Statue of Liberty. Sure. Wait, that kid's fighting the Statue of Liberty. And then in my brain, I thought, well, all science fiction just involves the Statue of Liberty, clearly.
For sure. Well, but back in the time, that was the quickest. I mean, like a commandy and this and that. It's a shorthand way to go. Civilization has failed.
That's right.
Every American child knows if you see the Statue of Liberty tipped over, shit's bad.
Right.
Like that's the quick shorthand. That thing is awesome, Jeff. Holy crap!
I added little
Thanks for that, baby, Jeff.
Lightning rod thing going on
there.
Oh,
and I'm gonna
that's
have
awesome, dude.
Energy go around. Those were good suggestions.
I'm telling you, this thing, man. His bioluminescence is going to be the shit.
It's just so creepy. All right, so
I know it's probably not what you had in mind, but based on the loose sketchiness of those hands, they almost kind of look like some almost look like they're eagle talon kind of things, like they'd be like those ribbed eagle finger kind of thing going on digits. I tell you, man,
it's a great idea.
If you had more room on the page, Jeff, I feel like some Tom Perkins like lobster claw hands would also go well there, but I don't think you got the space.
But you can always make them as part of the mandibles on either side of his head.
Yeah. One of Henry says Kirby Commandy Statue of Liberty as well. Yeah, but I think, look, we know how much Kirby was stolen and borrowed from Lucas and every conceivable guy, but it worked both ways. I think Kirby saw every movie he could see and different stuff, and I don't think Planet of the Apes had come out before Commandy, so I don't think it's a coincidence that Kirby was riffing off of that on purpose,
Well, I mean, the whole Commandy thing is very Planet of the Apes if you really stop and think about it. But even so, it's his sort of take on that thing.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you look at we work in television and comics and things and stuff, and I mean, a lot of stuff is cross-pollinated because someone goes, I have an idea, but what if we did this to it, and what if we did that to it? So I mean, it doesn't shock me.
No, and I think that's what's so fun about your personal work is that you basically have just turned cross-pollination into a heightened art form. You're like, all right, well, wait, I feel like drawing Star Trek. I've only got an hour before the 3 hours I'm going to sleep.
Sure.
Like, I feel like drawing Star Trek, but I also feel like drawing, superheroes. Can I combine the two elements in the 1 hour that I do have?
And it's funny you mention that because there was a time where I drew Star Trek Power Rangers, and they were a red, a yellow, and a blue. And that red one had to be the toughest bastard in town because he's the only one who's not getting killed all the time because you're those other red guys. They didn't make it, but I'm not going.
That is funny.
So, no, I mean, I don't know. It's a lot of the stuff I do before I go to bed, it's all the toys I wish I had, like say the Joker is a tokusatsu villain.
That's so crazy.
Look at that creepiness. I wish I
I mean, Heath Ledger's cool, but he didn't have mouth and teeth in his chest. Cool.
No, he didn't. He didn't have that super coolness.
Like, imagine that thing cackling at you. That would be upsetting.
Right. That reminds me of we just did an episode of Manziger Z, And a lot of those kaiju beast robot things had like weird heads and weird places.
Sure.
And so it's disconcerting. You never know quite where to look, like this one.
Holy Lord.
It's funny. So these kaijus have been popping up. There's a lot of these were part of a thing. It's funny. There was this podcast I listened to for a minute. I don't think it exists anymore, but it's called Podcast Zero versus Godzilla or something. And they would have a guest host on. And at the end of the podcast, they would go, hey, if you could be a kaiju, what would it be? And what would you call yourself? And blah, blah, blah. And maybe one of our fans will draw it. And the thing is they didn't know that they had a fan like me out there. So I took it as a weird challenge because much like our day jobs where like, a script may call for something that you would be like, how am I going to do that?
Right.
The challenge of it is to make it happen. Right. So, some of these hosts would have just crazy ideas. Like, I want a giant thing on roller skates and this and that. I'd be like, well, okay, I'm going to do that, but how do I make it cool? So I did a bunch of these just for kicks and I sent them in. They're like, oh, these are kind of cool.
Yeah. I love that. I love that beak one. And then I know we showed this one already, but I love this, the 9-tailed fox, snaky tail things at the end with the Cerebus. Just so cool looking.
I mean, I know that's actually just wolves but my friend, it's like lions and tigers and bears. It's like you imagine that Tom would just draw a lion, tiger, and bear creature.
It could still happen today.
Tom, do you start on paper or are you digital?
It really depends. I do a lot digitally now, though, just because of the limitation of time I have.
Mm-hmm.
But I do love working on paper. That's why, I do those books, sketch commissions and whatever, because then I get to work. I still get to do ink and paper and whatever. But a lot of it is like I have an idea in my head. I want to get it out before I go to bed.
Right.
Digital's the fastest.
Do you have a tablet you use, or you still you're sitting at your desk?
I'm sitting at my desk. Yeah, I'm
like
not cool like that. I wish I was cool like that, but I'm not.
But you'll basically start with a one layer where you'll do scribbles of shapes and things, and then you put another layer over, clean it up, or
yeah, I mean,
do you flip it back and forth?
Yeah, I mean, I'll do that. I'll do a lot of the traditional kind of things like that. I'll do the thing where I flip the image and all that other stuff like it's a regular thing. And then, by the time I rough out the sketch pretty tight, and then I'll throw a layer on top. I'll reduce the opacity down so it's like an onion skin thing, and I'll go over, I'll ink over the top, and then I'll take that and I'll do a layer with color, and I'll have another layer with shadows on it and effects and whatever.
See, we're gonna have to have Tom back on so he can actually draw. I want to see this happen.
Yeah, me too.
Actually, I tell you what. Afterwards, I'll send you a link to my YouTube channel that's got a couple draw through things, and they're speeded up, mind you. Like I think the latest one I did took me. I think it's like 2 minutes, but it was really 3.5 hours.
Right.
Well, luckily,
that's super cool. I can't wait to see those.
Scott worked on the Flash, so he can actually see stuff at super speed.
Ooh, I have no doubt because I read those books. I know. I'm all about that shit. I know that guy. Holy crap.
That's awesome. And that Spidey you got going is pretty awesome too, Scott.
Yeah, I like that.
Hang on a second. Yeah,
thanks, man.
Scott,
that's awesome, dude.
I was doing that at the con we were.
I love that one.
I love that Spidey sense kick in like duck, dude. Come on.
I was showing Jeff that there was a recent run on some Spider-Man stuff. I don't know if it was is it Bacalo?
Yeah.
It was in his book on Nonstop Spider-Man, where I was just stunned after all these years of seeing, Spider-Man stuff. Okay, yeah, that's cool. Yeah. All right. Well, since like Michael Golden's webbing of Spider-Man, then you're like, nothing new has really cropped around. But then they did this thing, dude, where every panel that Spider-Man was going to need to do something, his spider sense told him what to do instead of it just being the squiggles.
Holy shit, dude.
That was so awesome because it said duck, or it said left, or it said, get down, or whatever it was. And I'm like, holy crap, that's the coolest thing ever. So now whenever I'm doing it, that's what I have to do.
I'm not going to lie. I got to go check that book out. I had not read that book yet, but I love that artist. And I think that invention's pretty cool. I'd love to see that in action.
Yeah, it's very awesome. It's like 4 issues or so.
For those of us who grew up on Spider-Man, I mean, we're all familiar with the whole spider sense, the thing and this and that and the other thing. But to see like how it would play in his head so concretely, that's really neat.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that is amazing and a great innovation. And it's also, but it's when you just go back to like, I love the graphic symbolism that Ditko invented for the Spider Sense. It's
Oh, yeah.
such a strange, those weird, big, thick, black, wavy lines. You know, like we just think of it
What's
now
going
as,
on?
yeah, it's a very interesting, graphic symbol for, you know, for a psychic warning. You know.
For
Yeah,
sure.
there's so many genius things that Ditko did for Spider-Man stuff. The body posturing, all that stuff, the swinging, all these main tropes now that we know for Spider-Man that are just make him single out from everybody else. It's just there's no doubt that we all owe Ditko like a huge ton of thank yous because man, he created such a unique character for the next level of superheroes for that time.
I think most of us in television and or film or comics have had a moment where we've done some Spider-Man stuff. I will say, I love Spider-Man. When I was a kid, man, I was a huge Spider-Man fan, and drawing him though is never not a daunting thing with that webbing. I'm looking at that.
Yeah.
The whole like wrapping the webbing around the head was always a thing that was really like, how do we get, and especially as now I've done him for animation, like, how do we get that thing to go all the way around and work, as opposed to like, it works in this angle, and then he turns and you like go all to hell.
In comics, you get to just cheat.
Well done, you. Well played.
I got spoiled by my woman on my birthday a few days ago, and she got me that giant German Taschen like reprint of the first 20 issues of
nice.
Spider-Man. That's like a super duper oversized coffee table book that
That's
also has
awesome.
that storm is great, Scott.
Thanks, man.
That's super.
I
good,
love
man.
drawing that
Love
storm.
that.
But I feel so lucky. I love that Marvel did all those reprints in the 70s because I started collecting Spider-Man. I think I was getting the Ross Andrew Amazing Spider-Mans, and actually my gateway drug to John Byrne and Chris Claremont was Marvel Team Up. That was my first Spider-Mans, was Byrne and Claremont. But then thankfully, because of Marvel Tales, we were getting old Romita and Kane.
Yep.
And it wasn't new. And I think my parents even bought me like a little paperback of the first 6 issues that Ditko did. And I'm so glad I was exposed to that Ditko stuff at a young age to go, wait, that's Spider-Man too. That's the beginning.
Oh, sure. I mean, they, when I was a kid, I didn't get that digest, but similarly, I got the Kirby Fantastic Four stuff.
Man, that Wonder Woman's awesome, Scott. Did you draw this in Indiana too?
Right before Indiana, I did this Wonder Woman and the Storm. I did Spidey at the Indiana show,
Those
and
are
then I
great.
started the Hella one there when I was working on other stuff.
God, Kolins is a jerk.
Yeah, the Indian
It's only
show
because we
was
want to grow up
fun.
to be Scott when we get older.
Let's get back to Johnson's thing on the big screen.
Okay,
Holy
so
cow.
I'm just gonna I'm flipping it. I'm drawing on the back now.
Checking your things.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna finalize some of the decisions that we made.
Cool.
I like the baby.
See, Tom's looking down right now, and I know he's drawing something, and I can't see it, so it's killing me.
Right.
I'll send it to you later.
Tom draws in his sleep.
I wish I could do that too.
Dream about drawing a lot. I will say that.
Do you ever have a dream of a cool monster just pop into your head?
Oh, sure. Here's the thing. I don't know if other artists have experienced this, but I found that if you're hammering on a artistic problem, whether it's learning like some software or you're trying to solve a design problem or whatever, I find that there are some nights that I value highly where you go to bed, but your brain is still like workshopping that shit in the background.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then you wake up and you're like, fuck, I got it.
Yep.
Right.
Like I remember like having that happen on multiple occasions, and it's almost like your brain's like acting like it's still awake doing this stuff, going, oh, here's what I need to do for that.
I just listened to a John Cleese book about creativity, and he said those exact same things. That it's either you go off and do something else, or you can go off and have a nap or whatever else. And your brain, he would say he'd get stuck on certain skits for Monty Python, whatever, and they'd work on it all day and be frustrated. Then he'd go to sleep that night, and suddenly he realized there was a regular pattern where he'd wake up in the morning going, oh, that's the answer. That's what I needed.
Right.
No, and there's definitely something to that. I find that For me, like the whole artist block thing, I've done my utmost, knock on wood, I continue to do so, to avoid it because as a professional, I don't have the liberty to do that.
Right. It's tough when you have to still sit down and there's someone yelling at you.
Sure. Or like kids like eating every day, 3 times every day. So the thing I found though is that I'll go, okay, well, I'm having a hard time with this conundrum. So I'll instead of drawing something, maybe I'll sculpt something, or maybe I'll just shift into a different medium or something for a minute so that my brain kind of loosens up, and then you come back to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, what you described with sleep. That's definitely the positive side of it, because sometimes I've been working so much, and then like when I find that I'm dreaming in Toon Boom, it's like, oh God, can I just have a little bit of a break?
Can I have a break?
I don't want to be thinking about the timeline right now. Can I just fly and go underwater and visit other planets for a moment in my dream and not do it in the form of drawing?
Well, I will say that usually when I'm problem solving in my sleep, there are those times where I just play it out like a movie in my head. So it's not me drawing. It's more like going, oh, that's a cool ass monster. Cool. That's nice. I like that.
Right.
But, I think, I don't know. We all have that travail, my friend. We all have it.
I definitely would. I found that, and I know this is an old artist trick, but like I found taking a shower.
Mm.
Right. There's something about the calming nature of just warm water, and you can't have it's not a conscious place to be thinking, just sort of chilling out. And then a lot of times the answer will come, and then you're like, oh, and you have to run and go.
Showers are a very important part of a professional artist. I wish they were a more important part of more professional artists.
Sure.
But besides what Jeff just said, I also feel like I have very often had to do, like say you got up ridiculously early for a deadline and kids, and and then you work, you grind, like you're just killing yourself. You put in maybe already over 8, and then you still have to keep going because of your horrendous deadlines. So then you take like a 6 or 7 p.m. shower, and you're like, let me just pretend I'm just getting up and starting over again right now.
That's my favorite. Yeah.
I find that sometimes what I have to do is I'll sit there and I'll go, all right, I'll tell Siri to go, all right, wake my ass up in 25 minutes. I'm out.
Yep.
Then I get back up in 25 minutes and I hit it again because it's just that, like, you know what? I just need to reboot.
Yep.
I don't know if this story is true or not, but I always heard that Einstein would sit in his couch, or not his couch, in his chair with a weight in his hand, and that when the weight would fall out, when he would doze off, that's when he would get up.
I heard that was the other guy who made the light bulb and stuff.
Oh, Edison? Is that an Edison one?
Yeah, I heard that was Edison, but who knows?
Edison stole it from Einstein, retroactive time machine.
Right, who stole it from Tesla.
Exactly, right? And then was that robot comic showed up and saved everybody.
Tom, thinking about a comic that Scott just worked on that's so great, and your love of DC, it makes me realize that if I could pay you to do a commission right now, I'd love to see you do the James Gunn Suicide Squad character lineup of that.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be great.
Seeing you do Pokemon, not Pokemon. Pokemon be fun too.
Pokemon on the Suicide Squad. You remember that? Right?
Actually, that feels like a Tom Perkins jam, unholy jam drawing of like a polka dot man mixed with Pokemon. But
the Perkins verse.
Yeah, see, polka dot man, Bloodsport. It's have you draw Starro the Conqueror. The Thinker character looks like a Tom Perkins character, with all that shit coming out of his head.
Sure. Sure.
All right, Crisis.
That monster's looking awesome, Jeff. I'm not gonna lie.
All right, so this is fun. I definitely got
mandibles.
Yeah, I added some mandibles.
Like mandibles.
Definitely gonna have babies in those tubes on his back.
Well, it's great because Jeff is very good at drawing monsters and creatures, but now this makes me realize that I think Jeff's classical education and knowledge of mythology is so ingrained that very, very often there ends up being a real sort of Greek mythology aspect to Jeff's creatures.
Right. It's a Minotaur, or it's a Hydra, or it's,
Jeff's definitely your man if you want someone to draw you a Minotaur, for sure.
Oh, dude,
yeah.
for sure.
Well, he knows all those stories.
He does. He did his homework. Yeah, Jeff knows the difference between Daedalus and Icarus. But
I do.
Well, it's the fact that he's actually immortal and he was there, so he knows.
Yeah, no, I am one of. I was writing the stories down way back in the day.
yeah.
Well, I mean, he did fight a Minotaur once or twice, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So he knows how those things look.
Oh, that's awesome. Good choices to put up, Scott. I love that one.
Oh,
Of
which
just
is
the guy riding the thundercloud.
Yeah,
And I love his pose. Just like
My favorite is still this one's amazing. I saw this
Yeah.
one. That was just so freaking cool.
a kid in his symbiotic tech jacket thing. His best friend, his cape. So I enjoyed making that one. That was a lot of fun.
the blurred out BG is a really nice aspect too.
So cool.
Beep, 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 beep.
I will say that one day I hope to just do a show, whether it's for somebody else or for myself, where it's just alien worlds where we're not worried about, like just go crazy, just go nuts and draw all kinds of weird shit.
Well,
I think Jeff and I are ready to work on the show that you art direct, and I think you can bring that could be Scott's intro to animation. If you just put him to work on backgrounds and creatures.
yeah.
All right, guys, let's do it. Come on, kickstart this shit today.
No, and dude, this stuff has been. That's why it's been next to my table. I've been telling these other guys for I don't know, like 2 years now. I've been working on putting together a monster book, a creator-owned book, and I look at this stuff just to again break myself of whatever habits I get into of the same shapes or whatever else going on. Oh, I just love this stuff.
Yeah, I remember a long time ago, Phil Barlow, I was doing some stuff and he was like, hey, but how about you turn that on its head a bit? We've seen this before. Let's see a little bit of something else. And then there was another guy we worked with named Dave Hartman.
Oh, yeah, Dave's great.
Dave had given me some advice. It helped me with pushing shapes and stuff like that, because he'd be like, well, this is cool, but imagine if we push this here, made this thinner, this bigger, this. And suddenly I was like, wow, that's so much cooler than what I had. I want to learn how to play like that. And so thanks to Dave, it helped kind of tweak my brain a bit in the same way, like looking at a Mobius thing or whatever, but he's more in the horror end of the spectrum, whereas I'm more of like the National Geographic, I like monsters end. Because if you look at my monsters, they're rarely doing terrible shit. They're mostly just being cool, hanging out. Whereas Dave's are like scary as fuck.
Yes,
right.
That's for
Dave,
sure.
Dave definitely. I feel like Dave Hartman and Derek Robertson would get along well because they go into that next level, where it's like for Dave, it's dark and creepy, and there's like hairy, spooky textures on stuff where you're like, ah. And with Derek, there's blood oozing, and there's as scary as you still retain some Tom Perkins charm in even
like
your
these guys
scariest
right here.
thing.
You have Lovecraft meets the USS Enterprise, basically.
Right.
They're like the away team. So there's Captain Kirk and the science officer.
Going back to that one you were looking at before, Tom, Scott, with the purple 15 lady. I think that's another really fun thing that Tom's textures are so good and consistent. You can really read oh yeah, that's liquid drippy lady. Or you almost imagine that she might sound like when you rub a balloon. At a kid's party, that sound that balloons make if you rub her. But then that guy's hair and the other guy's kind of dull, scratchy metal. It's like everyone's textures are coming out really clearly.
Thanks, man.
A lot of this freedom of design and all that kind of stuff is really what I think that's missing from comics these days, from mainstream comics, of where I used to think that Marvel and DC were so genius at all this kind of stuff. I mean, yeah, it's obviously coming from the Ditkos and the Kirbys and Carmen Infantinos and Gil Kanes and all those guys that were designing all these things. But the level of just play with all of this stuff, it infers a whole universe of stuff, which makes it so open-minded. That's why I think kids really gravitate to this stuff, which is just so cool. It's like the ultimate litmus test to me.
Well, I think the thing for
Scotty, I think you mean imply. We're inferring it, and the person is implying it. But yes, I know what you're saying.
Well, I think some of that, like when you get to the Kirby's and Dickos, I think at that time, though, I mean, yeah, there were comics, but there was a little bit more open space to do things, and they weren't like multi-billion-dollar franchises on anything.
Yep.
So it's more like, let's just do things and see what works. And so, like, so when I'm doing this stuff, it's after hours when I'm like going, I'm just going to do what I want, as opposed to I'm not worried about pleasing anybody but myself or my kids, you know.
That's so great and just crazy. Reminiscent of X-51 a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, and like this is like me like channeling my inner Kirby because of like his space god stuff and his like weird circuitry things or whatever. I mean, that would be a real clear idea of like if Kirby Celestials were maybe on, you know, a little goofier, you know.
Cartoon Network.
Did you guys do
Kirby?
Machine Man on Earth's Mightiest Heroes, Tom?
No, I did a what if though, and that whole stream of things, because I did the Agents of Hate, but I only had Monica Rambeau and Machine Man, but I had them in their old school '80s costumes.
Nice.
Very,
I
very
love
cool.
that. I love that. That's something great.
Yeah, the Earth Mightiest Avengers was a tough show. That show was epic. You had a lot to do.
I really enjoyed that show. I had a really good time. That was one of those, as I say, those bucket list things, because growing up reading the Avengers and things like that, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's whole swaths of characters I wish we could have used. I wish we could have got Quicksilver in there, or Super Adaptoid, or, you know, so many. Like, I really was sad we couldn't have the X-Men or Alpha Flight show up. But
That would be great.
Well, that was kind of that timing of that show was that strange. Like, did Disney buy Marvel right before,
during
right
the
after?
run that we were making it? I remember when they bought them, and it was like, oh shit, what's going to happen to us?
And I remember hearing like constantly that your budget wasn't that big either. So it was basically like you, Jeff, Vinton, Ciro, and some spit and baling wire. You know, basically making an entire show in like 5 minutes. You know,
I mean, we worked really hard. I will say that people seem to really like that show. And it was nice to know, because, I mean, I don't go on the internet a lot to read comments, because there's a daunting amount of both positive and negative things to be said. And I'd rather not be deterred by any of that. So, but
Absolutely.
every so often you have people come up and they're like, oh, I used to come home from school and watch that show, or this or that. And it's nice to know that, you know, people saw what you did, you know. And I always think that's kind of neat when you hear about it.
Spooky.
Oh yeah, it is super creepy. One of the great things about working in animation after having been in comics for a long time is that you get to do stuff that you would never, that you miss as a comic book artist. Like I got to work draw a fight scene between Black Panther and the white gorilla, a white ape, right?
Yeah.
Right? That was I would never have been able to do that in comics. It's a done deal. And I also got to draw when Cap rode the rocket up and then fell into the ocean, right?
Yeah.
Like a pivotal scene. But I got to do a storyboard of that.
Gentlemen,
really
there's a turkey here that's Turkey Thulu.
Exactly. For when your holidays are going really off the rails.
Oh, look at that. That's out of control.
Tom, can people buy If still? Are there any more copies?
Oh yeah, no, I have plenty of copies with or without sketches in them. And if people hit my website, they can pick one up, or they could go to the Mighty Stewardings and pick one up there.
It's a great thing. We should actually start wrapping up a little bit. So below in the description box, everybody, is a list of Tom's various internet sites that you can go to and enjoy his work, but also some links to Amazon and his website where you can buy his work.
Go give Tom money. Yeah,
get these things, because
I'll feed kids with it. It'll be awesome.
Because Tom needs to continually work, because then we get cool stuff like this.
Plus, increase Tom's followers so that we can then work on a show that Tom creates.
Yeah,
exactly. I heartbeat. I got a tokusatsu thing right now. I'd be like, all right, guys, let's go make some giant robots. Let's go.
Oh, tokusatsu. Yeah, that is. Once again, I'm just going to go through some of the quick hits before we sign out. I love that one. And then Tom, were you just doing these guys for fun? Just these faces?
Yeah, just for fun. Just because I found this symmetry tool and I was playing with it just to kind of go like, I want to play with it, and because I hate front views of faces because they make me nuts
Mhm.
because they get very flat. And I thought I'll play with it as an experiment, see if I can make it fun for myself. And so here we go.
Yeah, that's cool.
They reminded me very much of the Men in Black lineup where
Mm.
they
Yeah.
that opening
Sure.
scene, especially this guy. This guy seemed very reminiscent of that era.
Men in
He's
Black,
a total stowaway on our planet.
Yeah.
Totally. I will say Men in Black was one of those series I wished I was on full time because I loved that. I loved the movie. And so seeing what they did with the show, I wanted to play with that. But the main title sequence was bloody awesome. And I think it was mostly designed stylistically by Miguel Prado.
Yeah, I mean, Prado is such an incredible. That was a stroke of genius for Richard Reynos and those guys to bring him in on Men in Black, and
That guy was a beast.
he's incredible. He's incredible.
Okay, and there is. I could have sworn I had one more. I had a. Oh, I guess I didn't load it up. You did a Black Bolt that I thought was ridiculously
I was
cool.
trying to do that in the style of, if I'm not mistaken, if the one you're talking about was, I was trying to do it in the style if we could get the Inhumans on Avengers or as my heroes, and we never could, but I wanted to.
That it's not on here. Unfortunate. All right, Tom. It has been you've given us an hour. It's been amazing.
Was a lovely time chatting with you guys as ever. And I'm ever so grateful to be invited to come and talk to you guys.
It would be really great. I will post this. Hang on a second. Let me show my sort of drawing. All right,
Sort of drawing my backside. It's an awesome drawing.
I think there's something in there.
Was that what you were talking about, Jeff?
Yes.
Hang on a second.
No, actually, I think it's actually something different. But I do love that piece.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
I'm not gonna lie, Triton was my favorite Inhuman actually, but Black Bolt's pretty awesome too.
He's great. Triton's great.
Those
Oh
are
yeah, so
great
I'll
designs.
finish this monster up. I think that I learned to think outside because I think you guys are right. I think it's always a thing that happens when you get trapped in your own little box, right? And being able to push and add, like, it never would have occurred to me to have babies in canisters on this guy's back, and that's so creepy.
There we go.
That's a ticket.
That's
Hang on a
awesome.
second. Scott,
That's
show
so cool.
yeah. I love that one. All right. Just
Cool.
so prolific. We can show your stuff all night long. Tom,
Well,
thank
I
you very much.
appreciate
Thanks
the
for
time, guys. I really do.
walking me through the monster stuff. Thanks for sharing all of your work and your time. This has been a blast. Would love to have you back on and do more monster stuff and get more specific too. I have so many questions about.
Next time I should be bolder and I should draw myself. I was daunted for you guys here drawing. I'm like, I'll just fuck it up.
Well, it could also, I mean, Tom's so great at monsters, but it could be fun to just have a character design episode too, where Tom's like, okay, have Tom knock out the silhouettes of a lineup for us, or something like that. Like, okay, you have to draw, the forever people.
We could do a drawing challenge where we come up with a theme and we just play with it and see what happens.
I love that.
Yeah,
that sounds
That's a great idea.
Okay,
that way
fun.
we're all working to a unified end.
I love it. I love that. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Tom,
It was a great pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for coming on, Tom.
There we go. All right.
Thanks, Tom.
Good night,
You're an
everyone. We're going
inspiration.
to go
I
and
love you.
call it.
Oh, I'll do it.